They were promised torture, starvation, and a death stripped of all dignity. But when Japanese soldiers arrived at Camp McCoy in 1944, what broke them wasn't cruelty. It was hamburgers and Coca-Cola. They expected execution, not survival. When the train jerked to a halt in frozen Wisconsin, dozens of captured men stepped down onto snow, their boots crunching against ice that burned through worn soles, blinking hard against winter light that seemed too bright. Two clean uniforms hung in tatters, held together by desperation and thread. Faces told the story: hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, cracked lips from weeks of hunger and rough transport. Every single man had absorbed the same doctrine drilled into them since enlistment: capture equals disgrace. Surrender is worse than dying. They'd been warned Americans would beat them, starve them, strip away every last shred of honor until they begged for death. Most had steeled themselves to be shot the instant those train doors opened. What they saw instead made them freeze. Wooden barracks stretched across white fields, guard towers. Yes, barbed wire, coiled tight sentries, holding rifles. But something felt wrong. The atmosphere wasn't what they'd imagined. There was structure here, rhythm even. A strange calm trucks rolled through on cleared paths. Smoke curled from chimneys, carrying smells of real food, thick, savory smells. Nothing like the watery broth they'd survived on for months. Prisoners traded quick, nervous looks. Some kept eyes down, refusing to show even a flicker of curiosity. Guards barked orders in English. Sharp, fast, incomprehensible. But the tone was firm, not vicious. Interpreters moved between them, explaining: line up, keep formation, move forward. Red Cross officials stood watching clipboards, ready. That alone stunned them back home. They'd been taught America ignored treaties, ignored rules. Yet here stood neutral observers, making sure protocols were followed. Was this theater or truth? Intake began immediately. Mechanical yet shockingly humane men were stripped, deloused. Their louse-ridden uniforms tossed into fires. Showers ran cold, harsh soap, scrubbed away months of filth and parasites. Some flinched, waiting for violence that never arrived. Others stood numb too, drained to react. Then medical inspections. A doctor worked the line, checking pulse, examining teeth, pressing fingers into joints swollen from malnutrition. He stopped at one man whose arm dangled, useless shrapnel wound, never treated properly. The doctor gestured. A medic appeared with bandages, antiseptic. The prisoner watched frozen as his wound was cleaned, wrapped, cared for. Why, one prisoner whispered in Japanese, "We are nothing to them." His companion had no answer, just stared at the fresh white gauze and felt certainty crack inside him. By afternoon, they wore new clothes, plain but clean, marked POW in bold letters, fabric thicker, warmer than anything they'd known in months. Some pulled jackets, tight, savoring heat. Others hesitated, as if warmth itself meant surrender. They marched to barracks as daylight died. Buildings were basic bunks, lining walls, stoves glowing in the center, wool blankets folded on every mattress. Not home, not freedom, but shelter. And after months in mud, in caves, in ship holds that felt almost like betrayal. That first night, lying on mattresses that seemed impossibly soft, they whispered through darkness, "This isn't what they told us. Tomorrow, the mask comes off. Tomorrow." But morning brought the same routine bugle at dawn, the same call they'd heard in their own army roll call. Names shouted, answered, then the announcement that would shatter everything. Mess hall breakfast. Lines formed slowly, hunger clawed at them, but so did fear. What would they receive? Scraps. Rotten food they'd seen, prisoner treatment in Japanese camps. Men reduced to animals, fighting over spoiled rice. Surely Americans would do the same. Mess hall doors swung wide. Heat poured out, and with it a smell that stopped men cold, rich, heavy, smoky meat. Real meat sizzling on grills. Stomachs clenched involuntarily, some pressed hands against bellies. Ashamed their bodies betrayed them. They shuffled forward, gripping tin trays tight at the counter. American cooks stood in white aprons, sleeves rolled back, despite cold behind them. Huge pots steamed food, arranged in neat rows. First prisoner stepped up. Cook grabbed a spatula, lifted a thick beef patty, charred and glistening, dropped it between soft bun halves. added fried potatoes beside it, golden crisp steaming, then reached for a glass bottle, dripping condensation, set it down with a quiet clink. Label read Coca-Cola in script that looked like art, not words. Prisoner's hands shook. Behind him, others leaned forward, trying to see. Whispers started racing back. "Meat, they're giving us meat. Has to be a trick." "Move along," Cook said, flatly, waving next man forward. Prisoner stumbled to a table. Eyes locked on the tray, like it might disappear. Others followed. Same hamburger, same potatoes. Same bottle hall, filled with Japanese soldiers, holding American meals, sitting at long tables, afraid to touch anything. Then someone lifted the bottle to his mouth. Liquid hit his tongue, eyes went wide. Sweetness exploded violent and sharp, followed by burning fizz that made him choke. He lowered the bottle gasping, and suddenly laughed, wild, uncontrolled sound that turned heads. Another man bit into the hamburger. Grease ran down his chin. He chewed slowly. Eyes squeezed shut like he was trying to memorize every second when he opened them again. They were wet. He dropped his head fast, shoulders trembling, didn't look up until he'd swallowed. Everywhere it happened, men weeping quietly, others laughing in shock, some just sitting frozen, staring at food that made no sense against everything they'd been taught. Americans serving barely noticed this was routine for them. Same burgers they ate, same Coke. They drank same fries they'd grown up on. Feeding prisoners, just another job, Tuesday morning. Duty, nothing special. But for Japanese prisoners, apocalyptic. One man leaned toward his neighbor. "They eat this every day." The other nodded slowly, couldn't form words. Realization settling like heavy snow. Their enemy wasn't starving, wasn't collapsing. Their enemy had so much food, even prisoners. Captives the lowest ate better than soldiers of the empire. Propaganda had lied, or truth had shifted either way. Their world just cracked wide open. By the time trays emptied bottles, drained silence filled the hall. Some folded hands like prayer. Others stared at walls trying to process. Guards called for order. Herded them back to barracks. They filed out without speaking. That night, conversations ran deep into darkness. "It's a trick fattening us to weaken us. Then why spend more on us than Japan spends on its own men?" No one answered the question, just hung there in cold air, unanswerable, terrifying. Days became weeks. Life at Camp McCoy found its rhythm. Prisoners got work assignments, shoveling snow, cutting wood. Helping nearby farms under guard work was real, but not brutal end of each day. They were paid not dollars but coupons for the camp canteen. Canteen was another shock. Candy bars, cigarettes, writing paper soap. One afternoon, a man stood holding a Hershey bar he'd bought with his own coupons, staring like it was sacred. In Japan, he whispered chocolate is medicine. Here they hand it to prisoners like candy. His friend said nothing. What could he say? Letters became lifelines, twice monthly. They could write home, heavily censored, but precious men, hunched over tables, gripping pencils, hard, trying to find words that would pass inspection. I am alive. I am fed. I am safe. Simple words that felt like lies. How could they tell starving families in Japan they ate hamburgers in America? Some got letters back, thin envelopes, familiar handwriting words about rationing, air raids, hunger. One man read his wife and children survived on boiled grass and black market scraps. He folded the letter carefully, slid it under his pillow. Didn't speak for 2 days. Guards confused them most. Yes, they carried rifles. Yes, they enforced rules, but they didn't spit on prisoners. Didn't beat men who moved slow. When an old prisoner slipped on ice. During work detail, guard reached down, pulled him up. No insult. No mockery. Just a hand offered, then withdrawn. Almost worse than violence, they understood violence they'd expected, but this casual humanity from an enemy following rules written in Geneva. Incomprehensible. One evening, young guard named Miller lingered by the fence, barely 20 soft, Midwestern voice photographs in his pocket. He showed them to prisoners who gathered curious, his mother, his father, 2 younger sisters in Sunday dresses. Prisoners didn't understand his words, but understood the faces in turn. They crouched, drew shapes in dirt. Their families, their villages, homes left behind. For a few minutes, war disappeared. No emperors, no flags, no propaganda, just men pointing at pictures of people they loved. Then, another guard called Miller. Away, moment ended. But something planted. Enemy had a mother. Enemy had sisters. Enemy was human. Inside barracks that night, arguments erupted. Some accused others of going soft, betraying honor by laughing with guards, learning English words. "Don't forget who they are," one man hissed. "Don't forget what they've done. And don't forget what you saw today." Another shot back. "They heal our wounds. They share food." Which story is the lie? Tension simmered for some. The kindness felt like humiliation. Proof they lived better as prisoners than families did as free people for others. It was revelation they couldn't ignore. Enemy wasn't a monster. Enemy was just a man with more resources, different rules. As winter turned spring, contradictions deepened. Prisoners planted gardens, played improvised games, attended English classes, stumbling over words like bread thank you days, blurred routine replacing terror, but weight of meaning never lifted. By summer 1945, rumors filtered through whispered conversations. Headlines glimpsed over guards' shoulders, then news no one wanted to believe. Japan surrendered. Some wept openly. Others sat stunned, silent. They'd been told their nation could never fall. Death was better than defeat. Yet defeat came while they sat behind American wire, eating American food, sleeping under American blankets. Shame crushed them, but so did something else. Relief, guilt, tangle of emotions without names. Preparations for repatriation began. Medical checkups, clean uniforms, schedules for journey home. They packed small bundles, wooden carvings made during idle hours, carefully folded letters. Few items from canteen as departure neared. Many found themselves glancing back at the camp. Not fondness. Something stranger the place they'd feared had confused them. Instead, fed them, sheltered them, treated them with humanity they couldn't square with their training. Journey home was long on ships. They huddled together, wondering what awaited bombed cities. Scattered families, broken, starving nation. They worried about being called cowards for surviving captivity. But they also carried memories. They couldn't erase that first hamburger sweetness of Coca-Cola. Quiet moments when enemy showed mercy instead of hate. When they stepped onto Japanese soil, devastation was worse than imagined. Cities reduced to ash, families living on grass tree bark. Children with hollow eyes, returning prisoners faced questions laced with suspicion. Why did you survive? What did you tell them? Did you betray your honor? Most stayed silent. What could they say that captors treated them with more humanity than propaganda, allowed that they'd eaten better as prisoners than as soldiers? In years after, a few spoke cautiously, told of Camp McCoy, Geneva. Convention rules, hamburgers, Red Cross inspections. Some listeners accused them of lying. Others looked away uncomfortable with truths that complicated simple war stories. But memories persisted. Decades later, one former prisoner told his grandson about first taste of Coca-Cola. Shock of sweetness, fizz, that made him laugh and weep. About guard who shared photographs, medic who bandaged wounds, cook who slid hamburger across counter without hatred. Then he said something grandson never forgot. Cruelty is easy to hate, but kindness from an enemy that stays with you haunts you because it forces you to see them as human, and once you do, you can never unsee it. Wars are built on idea. Enemies are less than human. Propaganda thrives on creating monsters. So killing feels righteous. But prisoners of Camp McCoy learned different truth. They learned enemy wasn't demon, but farmer's son from Illinois. That enemy believed in rules even in war. That enemy had mothers, sisters, strange fizzy drink called Coca-Cola that somehow represented entire civilization's casual abundance. Meal that shattered everything wasn't about food itself. It was about what food meant. Proof enemy lived in worlds so different, so prosperous. Even prisoners ate like kings. Proof propaganda lied. Empire's certainty was built on sand. Everything they'd been taught could crumble facing a single hamburger. Camp McCoy's legacy isn't found in battle reports, strategic victories. It lives in quiet moments, when humanity intruded on hatred, when guard helped stumbling prisoner, when medic cleaned wound, when cook served meal without malice. These moments didn't end. War didn't change outcome, but they changed men who lived them, planted seeds of doubt that grew into questions they'd carry forever. Questions about loyalty, about truth, about what it means to be human in midst of inhumanity. History remembers big moments, invasions, battles, treaties. But small moments matter too. Micro-discoveries that reveal who we are. When uniforms come off guns. Fall silent meal in mess hall, chocolate bar, in canteen, photograph of stranger's family. These are moments that outlast empires. Sometimes mercy cuts deeper than hate. Sometimes simple act of kindness shatters more than any weapon could. And sometimes hardest truth to carry is this: your enemy is human too. If this story moved you, subscribe to Volca WWW2 Tales. This is where forgotten moments of history come alive, where small truths hidden in margins of war reveal what we most need to remember, because wars end, but memory of mercy endures longer than victory.